I am Lucienne, 28 years old, working as a trauma nurse in Philadelphia. Today should have been special. Instead, I pulled a double shift with no celebration. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my father. "We sold your car. Family comes first. Be grateful we let you live here." Hours later, another blow. My brother starts college next month, and somehow I am responsible for his tuition. $5,200. Due this week. For once, I said no. My father's response: "Pack your things. You are dead to me." So I did. But I left something behind that has turned their world upside down. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to family who took you for granted. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. Growing up in Chestnut Hill, a middle-class neighborhood in Philadelphia, I never questioned the family dynamic that shaped my childhood. Our modest two-story colonial house stood as a testament to my grandparents' hard work. They had emigrated from Ireland in the 1960s, starting with nothing but determination. Within a decade, they built a successful construction business that my father Arthur eventually took over. My mother Diana worked part-time as a school secretary, but primarily devoted herself to maintaining our home and catering to my father's needs. My younger brother Jackson, 4 years my junior, completed our family portrait. From the outside, we appeared normal, even fortunate. But inside those walls, a clear hierarchy existed that placed me firmly at the bottom. My father ruled our household with uncompromising authority. A stocky man with perpetually furrowed brows, he measured worth through financial contribution and loyalty to his vision of family. That vision, as I would learn, was selectively applied. Arthur believed in tradition. Men led, women supported, and children obeyed without question. Except Jackson was granted exemptions that I never received. My mother, with her soft voice and avoidant eyes, never challenged this arrangement. When tensions rose, she disappeared into household tasks, pretending not to notice the disparities. Her favorite phrase became, "Let your father handle it." I realized early on that looking to her for protection was futile. Jackson grew into his privileged position naturally. By age 10, he had internalized that his desires took precedence. Sports equipment, gaming systems, summer camps all appeared without question. Meanwhile, I learned to minimize my requests after seeing how each one required justification, and often came with strings attached. Aunt Teresa, my father's younger sister, provided the only consistent warmth in my extended family. Unlike her brother, she noticed things, asked questions, and sometimes slipped me small gifts just because. She had moved to Pittsburgh after college, limiting our interactions to holidays and occasional weekends, but those brief connections sustained me. Uncle Robert, my father's older brother, presented another study in contrast. More financially successful than my father, he had built his own separate construction company that specialized in commercial properties. This created an undercurrent of competition that affected our entire family dynamic. His visits always left my father agitated and more demanding of perfection from my mother and me. Jackson somehow remained exempt from this heightened scrutiny. By 16, I was working weekends at a local diner while maintaining honor roll status. My earnings disappeared into a college fund my father insisted I establish, since, as he frequently reminded me, they could not afford to send me to nursing school. Jackson, meanwhile, focused exclusively on baseball, his potential athletic scholarship, our father's favorite topic of conversation. I managed to secure partial scholarships and worked multiple jobs throughout my undergraduate years. My parents contributed the absolute minimum they could without appearing completely uninvolved to extended family. Every semester brought new negotiations and reminders of the burden my education placed on them. Meanwhile, travel baseball teams, private coaching, and top-of-the-line equipment for Jackson never seemed to strain the family budget. After graduation, I secured a position at Philadelphia General in the emergency department. The work was demanding but fulfilling, and my independence felt hard-won. For 3 years, I saved diligently, living with roommates in a cramped apartment, taking extra shifts, and declining social invitations. My goal was singular: buy a car that was mine alone, something no one could take from me. The day I drove home in my used Toyota Camry navy blue with 90,000 miles on the odometer remains one of my proudest moments. At 25, I finally had tangible proof of my self-sufficiency. I had researched extensively, negotiated confidently, and signed the papers myself. My father seemed almost disappointed when I showed him the car, immediately pointing out potential mechanical issues and questioning my decision-making. But for once, his opinion could not diminish my achievement. 8 months ago, my relationship with Kyle ended after 3 years together. The apartment we shared was in his name, and my name alone was on the car. The split left me temporarily housing insecure until I could find something affordable in Philadelphia's expensive market. Despite my reservations, moving back to my parents' house seemed the pragmatic choice. We established clear terms. I would pay $500 monthly for the small bedroom that had been mine growing up. I would purchase my own groceries, handle my laundry, and contribute to utilities. The arrangement was supposed to last 6 months maximum, just until I found suitable housing. Initially, things proceeded according to plan. I worked my shifts, paid my dues, and spent minimal time in common areas to avoid friction. But as month 4 approached, subtle changes emerged. My father began commenting on how convenient my car would be for Jackson's college visits. My mother started asking if I could pick up groceries for the whole family since I was stopping anyway. Small requests grew more frequent, all phrased as reasonable expectations, because after all, family comes first. Looking back now, I recognize these as warning signs of the storm approaching. But at the time, I was focused on saving for my new apartment, counting down the days until I could reclaim my independence. I never imagined they would cross the line. They did never believe they would betray me so completely as to take the one thing that was undeniably mine. April 14th should have been a day of small celebrations and personal reflection. Instead, it became the day that shattered whatever illusions I still maintained about my place in my family. I had requested the day off weeks in advance, planning a quiet birthday celebration with friends in the evening. However, when a colleague experienced a family emergency, I agreed to cover her shift. Birthdays come every year, but emergencies demand immediate response. That is the nature of nursing. So instead of sleeping in, I arrived at Philadelphia General at 6 in the morning, prepared for a standard 12-hour shift in the trauma unit. The morning passed in the controlled chaos that defines emergency medicine. 3 car accident victims, an elderly man with mysterious abdominal pain, and a child with a severe allergic reaction, kept our team in constant motion. Around noon, Marissa, the charge nurse, appeared with a small cupcake sporting a single candle. This small gesture from my coworkers meant everything to me. We had exactly 90 seconds to sing an abbreviated happy birthday before alarms summoned us back to our patients. I wrapped the remaining half of my cupcake for later, touched by their thoughtfulness despite the hectic environment. Shortly after 2 o'clock, during a rare quiet moment, my phone vibrated with a text notification. My father rarely contacted me during work hours, knowing the nature of my job, so I felt a flicker of concern as I opened his message. Sold your car this morning. Got a good price. Family comes first. Be grateful we let you live here while you save up. I stared at the screen, certain I had misunderstood. My father could be controlling and dismissive, but this crossed into something different entirely. I typed back quickly. What are you talking about? You cannot sell my car, it is in my name only. His response came immediately. Already done. Paperwork signed. Buyer picked it up an hour ago. Jackson needs money for freshman year. You know how expensive college is these days. My hands trembled as I tried to process what he was telling me. The Toyota was registered solely in my name. The title remained in my fireproof lockbox along with my birth certificate and other important documents. For him to sell it, he would have needed to. I could not complete the thought, could not accept the level of violation it implied. Around me, the emergency department continued its rhythmic pace of urgency and resolution, but I stood frozen, my private life suddenly in crisis, while my professional one demanded focused attention. Marissa noticed my expression. Everything okay, Lucy? I nodded automatically, slipping my phone into my pocket. A trauma nurse cannot afford emotional indulgence during shift hours. Patients depend on our composure, our clarity. I compartmentalized the bomb my father had just detonated in my life and returned to my rounds, but the text continued throughout the afternoon. When I checked my phone during my break, I found several more messages waiting. You know we have always supported you. Now it is your turn. Jackson got accepted to Penn State. You should be proud of your brother. Financial aid does not cover everything. First semester tuition payment due next week. Each message twisted the knife deeper, but nothing prepared me for the final text that arrived just after 7 in the evening as I was updating patient charts before shift change. Your brother's first semester costs $5,200. We need your payment by Friday. You can use your savings. Not like you are using it for anything important. The breath left my body as though I had been physically struck. Not only had they stolen and sold my car, but they expected me to hand over my apartment savings for my brother's education. The money I had carefully accumulated through extra shifts, sacrificed weekends, and skipped vacations. The fun that represented my escape plan. Something broke inside me in that moment. A lifetime of uneven expectations of being the responsible one, while Jackson remained the unchallenged favorite. Years of watching my needs become negotiable while his remained paramount. In that sterile hospital hallway surrounded by the sounds of medical equipment and distant conversations, I found my voice. Not happening. That was all I texted back. 2 words. No explanation or justification. No emotional plea or angry tirade. Simply a boundary clearly stated. I did not have to wait long for the response. Then pack your shit and get out of our house. You are dead to me. I stood there, phone in hand, as a curious calm settled over me. For 28 years, I had twisted myself into shapes that might earn my father's approval. I had accepted less worked harder and swallowed injustice because family comes first. In 3 text exchanges, the pretense of familial love had evaporated, revealing the transactional nature of my relationship with my father. I was valued for my utility, nothing more. When my shift finally ended at 8, I found myself moving through the hospital corridors in a daze. In the locker room as I changed out of my scrubs, I realized I had no car to drive home. The implications of what had happened continued to unfold. I would need to get a rideshare. I would need to find somewhere to stay. I would need to. Are you okay? You have been off all afternoon, Marissa said, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. Before I could formulate a professional response, tears filled my eyes. Through broken sentences, I explained what had happened. My birthday, the car, the demand for tuition money, the ultimatum. Marissa's outrage on my behalf was immediate and validating. "That is illegal," she exclaimed. "They cannot sell a car that is not in their name." Then she did something that would change the course of my evening. "Let me drive you home," she offered. "You should not be alone right now, and you will need help moving your things." In that moment of unexpected kindness, I glimpsed the possibility of a support system beyond my blood relations. I accepted her offer, and together we left the hospital, heading toward the house that would not be my home after tonight. The 20-minute drive to my parents' house passed in a blur of anxiety and strategizing. Marissa's steady presence beside me provided an anchor as I mentally cataloged what I needed to take versus what could be replaced. Essentials only, I decided. Documents, professional attire, medications, irreplaceable mementos. The rest could wait. As we turned onto my street, the familiar colonial houses with their manicured lawns seemed suddenly foreign, as though I were seeing them through a stranger's eyes. My parents' house, where I had spent 22 years of my life before college, and these recent months now loomed as a hostile territory, I needed to navigate one final time. "Do you want me to come in with you?" Marissa asked as she parked across the street. I considered her offer. Having a witness might prevent the situation from escalating, but it could also trigger my father's sense of public appearance, leading to a more controlled performance that would break down the moment we were alone. "No," I said finally, "but if I am not out in an hour, maybe check on me." With a deep breath, I approached the house and used my key for what I knew would be the last time. Inside, the familiar sounds of a basketball game on television greeted me. My father sat in his recliner, eyes fixed on the screen deliberately, not acknowledging my entrance. My mother moved about in the kitchen, the clanging of dishes slightly louder than necessary, her way of communicating tension without confrontation. And there, sprawled on the couch with his feet on the coffee table and a bowl of chips beside him, was Jackson. My 24-year-old brother looked up briefly, meeting my gaze with an expression somewhere between discomfort and defiance, before returning his attention to the game. I headed directly upstairs to my room, intent on packing without engagement. But halfway up, my father's voice stopped me. "If you are going to be dramatic about this, just get your things and go. We do not need the theatrics." I turned slowly, facing down into the living room, where three pairs of eyes now watched me with varying degrees of emotion. My mother's fearful, my father's cold, my brother's uncomfortable. Dramatic would have been making a scene at work when I found out you forged my signature and stole my car. I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Dramatic would be calling the police right now to report what you did. A flash of something crossed my father's face, then recognition that I understood exactly what he had done to sell a vehicle registered solely in my name. But he recovered quickly. "You have lived under our roof, eating our food, I pay rent, and buy my own groceries," I interrupted. His face darkened at my insubordination. "You have never understood what family means. Always selfish, always putting yourself first." The accusation was so profoundly inverted that a surprised laugh escaped me. "Selfish, I worked through high school while Jackson focused on sports. I paid my way through college while you saved for his. I have covered family expenses, driven everyone around, taken the least desirable shifts to accommodate family events. And now when I finally say no to literally stealing my car and demanding my savings, I am selfish." Something shifted in the room as I spoke truths that had remained unacknowledged for years. My mother had stopped pretending to wash dishes and stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. My father's complexion had reddened, the vein in his forehead prominent. Only Jackson seemed unfazed, scrolling through his phone, as though this family implosion were an inconvenient interruption to his evening. "You knew about this," I said suddenly, turning my attention to my brother. "You knew they were selling my car." He shrugged without looking up. "Dad mentioned it a few days ago. Said you would be fine with it since you are staying here anyway." The casual confirmation that they had discussed this plan, that my brother had known my property would be stolen, and said nothing, sent a wave of clarifying anger through me. I was not just an afterthought in this family. I was a resource to be exploited. "How did you get the title?" I asked my father, needing to understand the full extent of the violation. "You leave your things lying around," he replied dismissively. "In my locked box, in my room." He did not answer directly, which was answer enough. They had waited until I left for my shift, entered my room, found my lockbox key, and taken documents that were legally mine alone. "I need to pack," I said, turning away before I said something unforgivable. Something that would match the unforgiveness already directed at me. In my room, I discovered yet another violation. Boxes of Jackson's dormitory supplies had been stacked in my closet, limiting my access to my own belongings. They had already been preparing for my removal, I realized. Perhaps they had anticipated I would object to their financial demand. Perhaps they had always seen my return as temporary, a convenient extraction of rent money, until they needed my space for something else. I began packing methodically, starting with my essential documents: birth certificate, social security card, nursing license, passport, financial records in the folder containing my apartment search information, then clothing for work and interviews, toiletries, medications, and the few sentimental items I could not bear to leave behind: my grandmother's silver pendant, the card my first patient had given me after recovery, photos from nursing school graduation. I worked in focused silence for nearly 45 minutes, filling 2 suitcases in a duffel bag. As I zipped the final compartment, my father appeared in the doorway. "You have until morning." "Anything you leave behind goes to Goodwill," he stated flatly. I looked up at the man who had contributed to my genetic makeup, but had failed at the fundamental task of parenthood, unconditional love. In his stern expression, I searched for any hint of the protective father who had taught me to ride a bike or checked under my bed for monsters. I found nothing but cold calculation. "I will be gone in 30 minutes, I replied. He nodded once and turned away. No goodbye, no acknowledgement of the seismic shift occurring in our family. As his footsteps retreated down the hall, I felt a complex emotion rise within me, a fusion of grief, rage, and an unexpected sense of liberation. The worst had happened. They had taken what was mine, rejected me entirely, and still I was standing, still breathing, still capable of moving forward. In that moment of clarity, I made a decision. I would take what was essential and leave today. But I would also leave something behind, something that would shatter the carefully constructed family narrative just as thoroughly as they had shattered my trust. It would be my parting gift, a truth bomb that had been a long time coming. With renewed purpose, I reached for my laptop and began to type. With my essential belongings packed and loaded into Marissa's car, I faced one final task before leaving my childhood home for good. While my family pointedly ignored me from their positions in the living room, I methodically prepared the parting gift that would soon upend their carefully constructed world. Over the years, I had accumulated a significant body of evidence regarding my family's dysfunctional dynamics and questionable practices. Not intentionally at first, just documentation that seemed prudent as I navigated an environment where gaslighting was common and boundaries non existent. But in recent years, particularly after beginning my nursing career and seeing how healthy families functioned, I had become more deliberate in my record keeping. Now I organize these materials into a comprehensive document, beginning with a detailed accounting of my financial contributions to the family, every rent payment since moving back home with dates and amounts, groceries purchased for the entire household despite our agreement that I would only buy my own, gas receipts from driving Jackson to baseball tournaments and my parents to various appointments, a spreadsheet showing how these expenses had systematically drained the savings I had been trying to accumulate for my own apartment. Next came evidence of the car theft. I had fortunately taken photos of my title and registration when purchasing insurance, proving my sole ownership. I added screenshots of the text messages revealing my father's admission to selling the vehicle without my consent. I estimated the car's current market value, noting this as the amount stolen from me in addition to the $5,200 they had demanded for Jackson's tuition. The document grew as I incorporated evidence of my father's questionable business practices. As his daughter, I had been privy to conversations not meant for public consumption. The cash payments to avoid taxes, the corners cut on building materials, while charging clients for premium quality, the systematic underpayment of immigrant workers who feared reporting violations. I included dates, project names, and specific dollar amounts whenever possible. Perhaps most damning was the information regarding my grandfather's trust. 3 years ago, while helping my grandmother organize her papers before moving to assisted living, I had discovered documents indicating that my grandfather had established educational trusts for both Jackson and me. According to the paperwork, each grandchild was entitled to $25,000 for higher education expenses. I had never received a penny from this trust, despite working multiple jobs to afford nursing school. When I questioned my grandmother, her confusion suggested she believed the money had been distributed as intended. Now I included copies of these trust documents, along with a timeline showing my college years and associated expenses that should have been covered by these funds. The implications were unavoidable. My parents had likely accessed my portion of the trust while hiding its existence from me, all while watching me struggle financially through school. I compiled everything into a professionally formatted document spanning 17 pages, complete with an executive summary at the beginning that outlined the pattern of exploitation in clear, unemotional language. I printed multiple copies, placing them in labeled envelopes. The first envelope I addressed to my Aunt Teresa, the one family member who had consistently shown me genuine care. The second went to Uncle Robert, whose competitive relationship with my father might ensure he took the information seriously. The third I labeled for my grandmother, though I suspected my mother might intercept it. The fourth I decided would go directly to Mr. Harrington, the family attorney who managed my grandfather's estate. I placed Teresa's and Robert's envelopes where they would be discovered after I left one on the kitchen counter, one in the family room. My grandmother's copy went into the outgoing mail slot. The final copy for Mr. Harrington would be mailed from outside the house. As a symbolic gesture, I also left behind 3 items carefully chosen to represent what each family member had taken from me. For my father, I left my childhood piggy bank, now empty except for a note reading, "Just like my trust fund." For my mother, the birthday cards she'd given me over the years, each containing the same generic message, with no personalization evidence of her emotional absence. For Jackson, I left the mathematics textbooks and study guides I had used to tutor him through high school, with a note saying, "Some things cannot be handed to you." With these arrangements complete, I took one final look around the bedroom that had witnessed my childhood dreams and adolescent tears. The space already felt foreign to me, as though my connection to it had been severed the moment my father had declared me dead to him. I felt a curious sense of completion, of circles closing and new ones beginning. I called Aunt Teresa while walking to Marissa's car, explaining in brief, measured terms what had transpired. Her shocked gasps gave way to immediate offers of assistance. "Come here, Lucienne," she insisted. "I have the guest room ready. Stay as long as you need." The genuine concern in her voice nearly broke the composure I had maintained throughout this surreal evening. I thanked her promise to arrive within the hour and ended the call before emotion could overwhelm me. Marissa had waited patiently, keeping the engine running and watching the house with the protective vigilance of someone prepared to intervene if necessary. As I settled into her passenger seat with my belongings secured in the trunk, she squeezed my hand in silent support. "You did it," she said simply. "The hardest part is over." As we pulled away from the curb, I did not look back at the house. Instead, I focused on the road ahead, on the unfamiliar path I was now forced to travel. I felt lighter than expected, as though I had shed not just material possessions, but the crushing weight of unreasonable expectations and conditional love. The package of evidence I left behind would detonate in my absence, exposing truths long buried beneath the family, come's first mantra that had been weaponized against me. It would cause pain and chaos, yes, but it would also force accountability where none had existed before. For the first time in 28 years, I had chosen myself over family obligation, not out of selfishness, but out of self-preservation. As the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood receded in the distance, I allowed myself to acknowledge a surprising emotion emerging through the grief and anger. It felt remarkably like hope. The 20-minute drive to Aunt Teresa's townhouse in Manayunk offered my first taste of freedom despite the circumstances. Marissa maintained a considerate silence, understanding that I needed this transition time to process the seismic shift in my life. As Philadelphia's evening lights blurred past the windows, I focused on steadying my breathing, on existing in this liminal space between my old life and whatever awaited me. Aunt Teresa stood waiting on her front porch as we pulled into her driveway, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. At 52, she retained the warm-hearted demeanor that had made her my childhood refuge during family gatherings. Unlike my father, who had inherited their father's stocky build and stern countenance, Teresa was willowy with expressive eyes that missed nothing. She embraced me tightly before I could even speak, then immediately began directing the unloading of my belongings, as though I were a long-expected houseguest rather than a family exile. This normalized reception provided exactly the emotional ballast I needed. "You must be Marissa," Teresa said, extending her hand to my colleague. "Thank you for looking after our Lucy. Please come in for some tea before you head home." The quiet authority in her voice brooked no argument. And soon we were seated around Teresa's kitchen table, mugs of chamomile tea steaming before us. The domestic normalcy of the scene nearly undid me after the chaos of the evening. Here were no accusations, no cold shoulders, no tactical positioning for advantage, just three women sharing tea and concern. After Marissa departed with promises to check on me tomorrow, Teresa turned her full attention to me. "Now tell me everything from the beginning," she said, refilling our mugs. The story spilled from me in fits and starts: the birthday shift, the shocking text about my car, the demand for tuition money, the ultimatum when I refused, and finally the document I had left behind. With each revelation, Teresa's expression shifted between disbelief, outrage, and grim confirmation. "I always knew my brother could be controlling, but this crosses into criminal territory," she said when I finished. "Forgery, theft, possibly fraud with your grandfather's trust. Not to mention the emotional abuse." Her validation of what I had experienced released something tight within my chest. For years, I had questioned whether I was overreacting, whether my perception of differential treatment was merely sensitivity or jealousy. Hearing someone else, especially someone who had known my family intimately, confirm the wrongness of their actions felt like permission to trust my own judgment. "There is something you should know," Teresa said, hesitating briefly. "Something I have suspected for years, but could never confirm until now." She disappeared into her home office, returning with a folder of legal documents that looked significantly older than the ones I had discovered. "Your grandfather was very specific about his wishes for his grandchildren," she explained, spreading the papers before me. "Martin believed strongly in education and equal treatment." As I scanned the documents, the details of my grandfather's estate plan became clear. Not only had he established the educational trusts I knew about, but he had also arranged for each grandchild to receive an equal portion of proceeds from the family construction business upon turning 30 or completing a professional degree, whichever came first. I had completed my nursing degree 3 years ago. According to these terms, I should have received a substantial distribution at that time. "Did you ever receive any money from the family business?" Teresa asked quietly. I shook my head, stunned by the implications. "Not a penny. I did not even know this provision existed." "I suspected as much," she sighed. "Arthur has always had his own interpretation of family obligation, one that flows conveniently in a single direction." As the reality of this additional betrayal settled over me, my phone began buzzing with notifications. First one, then several in rapid succession. I ignored them, not yet ready to face whatever fallout had begun. Teresa nodded toward my phone. "It is starting, is not it?" I checked the screen briefly. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 text messages from Jackson, a voicemail from Uncle Robert. It seemed my parting gift had been discovered sooner than expected. "I should turn this off," I murmured, powering down the device. "Whatever they have to say, I cannot hear it tonight." "Good decision," Teresa approved. "Tomorrow is soon enough to deal with their reactions." We spent the next hour making practical arrangements. The guest room would be mine for as long as I needed it. Teresa insisted I take at least 2 days off work to stabilize my situation, no small concession from a nurse during staffing shortages. We made lists, documents to gather authorities, to notify about my address, change potential apartments to investigate. Throughout this pragmatic planning, Teresa interspersed stories about my grandfather that I had never heard, painting a picture of a fair-minded man who would have been appalled by what had transpired. "You are more like him than anyone else in the family," she told me. That same sense of justice, of doing what is right even when it is difficult. Around midnight, exhaustion finally overwhelmed me. The emotional upheaval combined with my double shift at the hospital left me barely able to keep my eyes open. Teresa showed me to the guest room, where she had already turned down the covers and placed fresh towels on the dresser. "Rest now," she said, patting my shoulder. "Things will look different in the morning. Not necessarily better right away, but clearer." As I settled into the unfamiliar bed, the emotional dam I had maintained throughout the day began to crack. Tears came quietly at first, then in heaving sobs that seemed wrenched from some deep wounded place within me. I cried for the car that represented my independence, for the family I had lost, for the years spent seeking approval that would never come. Most of all, I cried for the child I had been, who had never understood why her best was never enough. Yet beneath the grief ran a surprising current of relief. The constant strain of trying to earn love from people constitutionally incapable of giving it unconditionally had ended. The exhausting vigilance, the careful self-editing, the perpetual bracing for the next disappointment, all could be set aside now. Eventually my tears subsided, and a profound weariness took their place. Just before sleep claimed me, I realized this was the first night in years that I would rest without walking on eggshells, without listening for footsteps in the hallway, or bracing for passive-aggressive comments at breakfast. Despite everything, I slept more deeply than I had in months. Morning arrived with sunlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains and the distant sounds of Teresa moving about the kitchen. For a disorienting moment, I struggled to place myself before the events of the previous day came rushing back. Yet the crushing panic I expected did not materialize. Instead, I felt a curious lightness, as though a long-term fever had finally broken. I checked my phone briefly upon waking, finding it flooded with notifications. 37 missed calls, 22 voicemails, over 50 text messages. A quick scan showed they came primarily from my parents and brother, with a few from Uncle Robert and other extended family members. I set the phone aside without reading any of them. Their urgency was no longer my emergency. When I finally made my way downstairs, I found Teresa at her kitchen table, with her laptop open, a serious expression on her face. "Your document has made quite an impact," she said by way of greeting. Robert called me at 6 this morning beside himself. "Is he angry?" I asked, preparing for yet another family member to turn against me. Teresa's smile held a touch of satisfaction. "Oh, he is furious, but not with you. It seems your father has been mismanaging the family business assets for years. Robert suspected, but could never prove anything. Now he has documentation thanks to you." As we shared breakfast, Teresa revealed more about the family dynamics I had only partially understood. The competition between my father and uncle had extended beyond personal rivalry into business practices. My grandfather had left them equal shares in the construction company, with the expectation they would collaborate. Instead, my father had gradually maneuvered to control daily operations, while providing minimal financial reporting to his brother. The trust issue particularly inflamed Robert, Teresa explained. Martin was explicit about how his grandchildren should be treated. "To think Arthur and Diana redirected your educational funds while watching you work those terrible jobs through school." Robert is livid. Later that morning, I received a call from an unexpected source. Mr. Harrington, the family attorney, requested an urgent meeting. It seemed my mailed document had reached him with surprising speed. "I can see you this afternoon if possible, Ms. Walker," he said formally. "These allegations regarding your grandfather's trust are extremely serious. I need to review your documentation." The meeting was set for 2 o'clock. Another step into my new reality. Another confirmation that the path forward, while uncertain, was irrevocably separate from the family that had betrayed me. I awoke the next morning to a cacophony of notifications on my phone. The screen displayed dozens of missed calls, voicemails, and text messages. A cursory glance revealed increasingly desperate communications from my family. While tempted to continue ignoring them, I decided to at least scan the messages to understand what was unfolding at my former home. My mother's text progressed from plaintive, "Please call us, we need to talk," to panicked, "Your father is beside himself. What have you done?" Jackson's messages evolved from angry accusations, "Way to blow everything up," to confused questions. "Did Dad really take your trust money?" My father predictably vacillated between threats and attempts at manipulation. Most revealing were the messages from extended family members who had clearly received or heard about my documentation. Cousins I rarely spoke with were suddenly checking in. My grandmother had left 3 voicemails, her wavering voice expressing shock and concern. Even distant relatives seemed to be choosing sides in what was rapidly becoming a family schism. Most interesting was the neighborhood group chat that Teresa still belonged to, despite moving years ago. Neighbors were reporting unusual activity at my parents' house since early morning. My father had apparently been going door to door desperately seeking advice or assistance, though the nature of his emergency remained unclear to those posting. "I will never understand people who air their family business to the entire neighborhood," Teresa commented, scrolling through the updates. Though I must admit it is satisfying to see Arthur scrambling for once. While eating breakfast, I received a video from our next-door neighbor's daughter, a former classmate who had apparently heard through the family grapevine about my situation. The brief clip showed my father on the Petersons' front porch, gesticulating wildly while Mr. Peterson stood with arms crossed, shaking his head. The caption read, "Your dad is going house to house asking about lawyers. What did you do?" I set the phone aside without responding. Whatever crisis my father was experiencing was entirely of his own making. For the first time in my life, I felt no responsibility to manage his emotions or solve his problems. The true extent of the family fallout became clearer when my mother finally reached Teresa directly. I could hear only Teresa's side of the conversation, but it painted a vivid picture. "He did what?" Teresa exclaimed at one point, eyes widening. "Well, of course Mr. Harrington is involved, Diana. Those were legal trusts with binding terms." After several minutes of listening with occasional sharp comments, Teresa's tone softened slightly. Look, Diana Lucienne is safe, and that is all you need to know right now. Perhaps instead of worrying about legal consequences, you should be asking yourself why your daughter felt she had to leave that way. When she ended the call, Teresa looked troubled but resolute. Your mother claims your father had a meeting with Mr. Harrington this morning that went very badly. Apparently, there are serious questions about how the trust funds were managed, or mismanaged more accurately. A cascade of calls continued throughout the morning. Uncle Robert phoned his normally measured businessman's voice tight with controlled fury. I have reviewed everything you sent Lucienne, he said. I have also spoken with Harrington. What your father did with your trust fund was not just unethical, it was likely illegal. I have already contacted my own attorney. My brother texted repeatedly, his messages evolving from accusatory to confused to almost plaintive as the morning progressed. His final message simply read, Did you know I had no idea about any of this trust stuff? I believed him. Jackson had been as much a pawn in my father's manipulations as I had been, albeit one who benefited rather than suffered from the favoritism. His entire sense of self had been constructed around being the golden child, the family athlete whose future warranted investment and sacrifice, primarily mine. Learning that his college fund may have partially consisted of money diverted from my trust would be a significant blow to that identity. By mid-afternoon, when Marissa arrived to check on me as promised, the situation had escalated further. My father had apparently attempted to access accounts associated with the family business, only to find that Uncle Robert had already moved to restrict his authorization pending financial review. All this feels surreal, I admitted to Marissa, as we sat in Teresa's garden, momentarily sheltered from the storm of family drama. 24 hours ago, I was the one being disowned. Now my father is the one facing consequences. Marissa, with her characteristic directness, squeezed my hand. Good. From what you have told me, these consequences are long overdue. As the day progressed, I focused on practical matters, rather than the continuing family chaos. Teresa helped me research affordable apartments in neighborhoods that would allow a reasonable commute to the hospital. I contacted my bank to ensure my accounts were secure and began the process of reporting my car as stolen, providing the documentation of my father's admission via text message. I also reached out to my supervisor at the hospital, explaining in professional terms that I was experiencing a family emergency and temporary transportation issues. Her response was unexpectedly supportive, offering flexible scheduling until my situation stabilized and connecting me with a colleague who lived nearby and could provide rides to work. These small steps toward reconstructing my life provided anchoring points amid the emotional turbulence. Each decision I made independently, each plan I created without family approval, reinforced that I could indeed build a life on my own terms. By evening, I had turned off notifications from my immediate family, needing space from their alternating demands and justifications. I had, however, scheduled a meeting with Mr. Harrington for the following morning to discuss my grandfather's trust and the possibility of recovering misappropriated funds. Tomorrow, I begin rebuilding, I wrote in the journal Teresa had given me. Not what was lost, but something new, something that belongs only to me. As I prepared for bed that night, Teresa knocked gently on the guest room door. I just wanted to say how proud I am of you, she said simply. What you did took tremendous courage. The unexpected praise brought fresh tears to my eyes. Throughout my life, I had received so little affirmation that even this simple acknowledgement felt overwhelming. I do not feel courageous, I admitted. I feel scared and angry and sad all at once. Teresa smiled with understanding. That is exactly what courage feels like sometimes. It is not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. As she wished me good night, I realized that perhaps family could still be a source of strength in my life, just not the family assigned to me by birth. The family I would choose for myself from now on based on mutual respect and genuine care, rather than obligation and control. Outside Teresa's townhouse, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, indifferent to my personal upheaval. Somewhere across town, my father was facing the consequences of decades of manipulation. My mother was probably retreating into deliberate obliviousness, as she always did during crises. My brother might be questioning his place in the family narrative for the first time. Their story would continue without me as the compliant daughter, the reliable nurse, the convenient scapegoat. And my story would continue without them as the controlling father, the passive mother, the entitled brother. We had reached a narrative fork in the road, and I had finally chosen my own path. 3 months after the night that transformed my life, I stood in the center of my new apartment watching morning light filter through blinds I had chosen and installed myself. The space was modest by most standards, a one-bedroom unit in a converted factory building in Fishtown. But every square foot represented something precious, independence built entirely on my own terms. The weeks following my departure from my parents' home had unfolded with both challenges and unexpected victories. My meeting with Mr. Harrington had confirmed my suspicions about the mismanagement of my grandfather's trust. Not only had my educational funds been diverted, but the distribution I should have received upon completing my nursing degree had been withheld entirely. The legal proceedings initiated by Mr. Harrington and reinforced by Uncle Robert's separate actions had resulted in a substantial financial recovery. The trust funds that should have been mine were finally transferred to my control, along with interest and penalties assessed against my father for the unauthorized use. The amount just over $70,000 represented not just financial security, but a symbolic restoration of what had been taken from me. My first decisions about these funds reflected priorities shaped by recent experience. $10,000 went into a secure emergency fund. Another portion purchased a reliable used Subaru Outback to replace my stolen Toyota. The remainder I divided between retirement savings and tuition for the nurse practitioner program I had deferred for years due to financial constraints. The car situation had resolved in unexpected ways. Because my father had forged my signature on the title transfer, the sale was fraudulent. The unwitting buyers were understandably distressed when contacted by authorities, having believed they were participating in a legitimate transaction. Rather than pursue criminal charges against my father, which would have complicated their situation further, I negotiated directly with them. They kept the Toyota. I kept the payment they had made to my father, which Uncle Robert helped recover from my parents' accounts, and everyone avoided protracted legal entanglements. My professional life had stabilized more quickly than anticipated. Philadelphia General had accommodated my sudden housing transition with remarkable flexibility. And my colleagues particularly, Marissa had formed a support network that made the practical challenges more manageable. 2 months after my family rupture, I had successfully applied for an advanced trauma certification that would increase both my professional opportunities and my salary. The apartment had come together piece by piece, each addition a deliberate choice, rather than a compromise or obligation. The kitchen table where I now enjoyed my morning coffee had been found at a neighborhood estate sale. The bookshelves displaying my nursing texts and growing collection of novels came from a local craftsman Teresa had introduced me to. Even the simple cotton curtains represented a small act of self-determination, their sage green color chosen solely because I found it soothing. My relationship with extended family had evolved in complex ways. Teresa remained my most steadfast supporter, our weekly dinners becoming a cherished ritual of mutual care. Uncle Robert had surprised me by becoming an unexpected ally, his businessman's pragmatism extending to helping me establish sound financial practices for my newfound resources. My grandmother once, she understood the full situation, had tearfully apologized for not recognizing what was happening with the trust she and my grandfather had established. Contact with my immediate family remained minimal and carefully boundaried. My mother had made several attempts at reconciliation, each characterized by a familiar pattern of minimizing harm and appealing to family obligation. I responded with polite firmness, making clear that any future relationship would require acknowledgement of past wrongs and demonstrable change, not simply resumed expectations. My father had cycled through various strategies: anger, guilt, manipulation, financial threats, and finally, when those failed, a stiff attempt at apology that never quite acknowledged the specific harms he had caused. His position within the family business had been significantly diminished after Uncle Robert's financial review revealed years of questionable management decisions. The power dynamic that had defined our family for decades had fundamentally shifted. Perhaps most surprising was the evolution in my relationship with Jackson. The collapse of our parents' carefully constructed family narrative had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his privileged position. His initial resentment had gradually given way to confused questioning and eventually tentative steps toward genuine self-reflection. 6 weeks after my departure, he had contacted me with a simple text. "Can we meet sometime? Just us." Without the drama of orchestrated family gatherings or parental supervision, we had shared coffee at a neutral location and begun the complex process of redefining our sibling relationship. "I do not know how to be your brother without them telling me what that means," he had admitted with unexpected candor. "I do not know how to be your sister without feeling like I am always giving more than I get," I had responded honestly. From that shared uncertainty, a more balanced relationship had slowly begun to form. Jackson had taken a year off from college, finding work at a local hardware store, while he reassessed his actual interests versus those our father had projected onto him. Our interactions remained cautious but increasingly authentic, unburdened by the comparative framework that had previously defined us. As I prepared for my morning shift at the hospital, I reflected on the curious paradox my life had become. By losing what I had been raised to value most, family belonging, I had gained something far more precious: self-possession. The ability to define my own worth, establish my own boundaries, and build connections based on reciprocity rather than obligation. The nurse practitioner program would begin in the fall, opening new professional avenues I had once considered beyond reach. My circle of friends had expanded beyond work colleagues to include neighbors, fellow students in a photography class I had impulsively joined, and even a potential romantic interest, though I approached that possibility with appropriate caution. I had expected the aftermath of family rupture to feel primarily like loss. Instead, it increasingly felt like expansion. The space once filled with unreasonable expectations and conditional approval now contained possibilities I was only beginning to explore. When my phone chimed with a text from Marissa confirming our carpool arrangement, I gathered my belongings and prepared to leave for work. The message included a postscript: "Happy 3-month apartment anniversary, bringing celebration coffee." This simple acknowledgement of my new beginning brought a smile to my face. In the midst of trauma nursing, with its daily confrontation of human fragility, I had discovered my own resilience. Not as an immutable trait I was born with, but as a capacity cultivated through difficult choices and their consequences. "Family comes first" had been my father's mantra, wielded as justification for exploitation and control. In rejecting that twisted interpretation, I had discovered a more authentic truth. Self-respect must come first, because without it, we have nothing genuine to offer others. As I locked my apartment door behind me, a simple act that represented autonomy and security, I carried this understanding forward into the day ahead. The journey from exploitation to empowerment had been neither simple nor painless, but standing on the other side of that threshold, both literally and figuratively, I could finally recognize it as necessary. Some lessons can only be learned through loss, some strengths forged only through adversity, and some freedoms achieved only by walking away. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family obligation and self-preservation? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that setting boundaries is not selfishness, it is self-care. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. And remember, sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we are born into. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to honor your own worth, whatever that journey may require.